Okay, so this is brand new. This is the On Second Thought podcast. I'm Jim Perdue with my wife, Stephanie Perdue.
So what's our goal here?
So we'll talk ministry, we'll talk marriage, we'll talk parenting. What else do you want to talk about? I don't know. I think this is going to be good. I'm excited to be able to talk about some of this kind of stuff. Nobody has all the answers. We don't have all the answers, but we can kind of walk with people and help some folks along the way. Okay, here we are on Second Thought Podcast, locked in the closet with Stephanie.
It's a studio.
It is.
We're professionals now.
Yes. We've
done this more than once.
Getting locked in the closet to back to our fabulous studio. I'm here with my wife, Stephanie Perdue, and this is Jim Perdue.
I always laugh that you tell them my last name.
What do you do?
In case you had another wife.
There's a lot of Stephanies in the world.
This is my wife, Stephanie Perdue.
We expect a worldwide audience on this podcast, and so we have to let people know.
I would have a different name than you.
Oh, no. I'm here with my wife, SP, and we're going to do a podcast today, and apparently I have already started off wrong. So
You're great. You're doing a great job.
Oh, thanks so much. I appreciate that.
Well, I'm glad you're here with me today.
Are you the host today?
I'm the host today.
Okay. Why don't you host this thing and start rolling along?
Welcome to my podcast, On Second Thought.
With Jim Perdue.
With Jim Perdue, my husband. So,
on Second Thought.
Today, on this podcast, On Second Thought, we're going to talk about you.
Oh, great.
More than me. I'm sure I'll chime in.
I think people want to hear about you more than me.
Well, it's not about me today. It's all about you.
No.
So we've actually...
That is not a marriage lesson we've learned so far.
I don't know. I have gotten lots of comments. They want to see what my face looks like when we're talking.
Oh, I hear a video podcast is on the way.
And negative ghostwriter.
I know. That's one thing we heard early on. I will do this, but no chance for a video podcast. I think we're working on it, though. I think I see just maybe a little bit of a,
I would really have to fix my face. Anyway, so back to you, not about me. Oh. So we've talked about our faith journey, and yours is, goes a little bit further. Yours becomes your job, the way you provide for your family, and becoming a pastor. And what does that look like? I think we talked in the past that wasn't necessarily, you weren't born to say, I'm going to be a pastor.
Yeah. Well, so I do think my faith journey ties into my calling to ministry for sure. And for me, it started when I was really young. I think even trusting in Christ at a young age, around 11 years old. And then really, I know this sounds so silly, but really a couple of years later, maybe in middle school, saying, you know what, I'm tired of kind of back and forth playing the game. I really want to get serious about my relationship with God, till just a few years later, God calling me to ministry. And this is one of the things that I tell students today. And this is one reason I tell parents too. Youth retreats, beach camp, ski trip, or winter retreat, or whatever. Both of those moments in my life, the one between my 7th and 8th grade year and my 11th and 12th grade year, both of those moments came during a summer in a youth camp experience. And so I would tell parents these days, especially, there are so many things you can do. But make it a priority for your kids, for your students to be a part of what our student ministry is doing here at Second, or whatever church you're involved in. And, send your kids, make that a priority. And the good thing here at Second is if you even say, I want my kids to go, but I can't afford that. There's a way for them to get a scholarship to be able to go. So that's not really a commercial, but that's the way God kind of spoke to me in moments like that. And so I was probably my 10th grade year, 16 years old, my 11th grade year, 17 years old, at Houston County High School right here in Warner Robins, Georgia. And that is about the time you start thinking, what are you going to do with your life? Where are you going to go to college? What are you going to study? Your junior year, everybody's asking you those questions. If you don't know by your senior year, you get tired of everybody asking those questions. And I had always assumed, I grew up working in my dad's agriculture business, so that he had grain elevators. One was in Bon Air. I worked at that one. He had several other ones across the state. And I grew up working there, and I just always assumed as the oldest son, you're just supposed to kind of follow in your father's footsteps, right? That's your job. You're supposed to take over the family business, step into his shoes when it's time and just keep things rolling. And maybe I put that expectation on myself, but I also felt like that's what everybody expected of me. So I felt like that's what my parents wanted, or that's what my family thought should happen. And the summer between my junior and senior year, God just wrecked me. I can remember it was after the invitation at a youth camp. Everybody had gone to their rooms, and I was just broken. And I had been struggling with this decision for several months, probably from December, and now it was the end of June. And I grabbed our associate pastor and I said, I just need to talk. And even in that moment, I couldn't. You ever in a situation where you need something, but it's hard to verbalize what you need? That's where I found myself in that moment. Pastor's like, hey, what do you want to talk about? I said, I don't even know. God is doing something in my life, and I don't even know how to put it into words. I know I'm saved, but I feel like I've been wrestling with God for months, and I am ready to, I almost said like, I'm ready to give up. And I just thought give up was, working through that and not being able to put a label on it. I didn't even really know what was going on. We talked for a while, and during that time, it just became abundantly clear and evident that God was calling me to ministry. And the language that I've heard other people say when you tell them that you're going to be a pastor, you're going into ministry, is like, that's great. If you can do anything else and be happy, do that. That's the advice that you get, yes, right? Yeah. You heard that before. If you can do anything else and be happy, do that instead. And I've always wondered, I've always wondered, well, is there anything else I could do? You have to search through an unlimited option of other professions. But for me, it was more, I was compelled. I was clearly called. And as I began to share that news with the pastor then, and others at camp, they affirmed that in my life. And I was home in just a few days and having a conversation and thinking as a teenager, like, I got to tell my parents what God is doing in my life. Remember the expectation, right? The expectation in my mind, at least, was the oldest son's supposed to take over the family business. He's supposed to kind of step into his shoes. That's what my parents are going to want me to do. And I was the kind of kid, you know what kind of kid I was? Like, I wanted everybody to like me. I wanted to make everybody happy. I was kind of a pleaser, and so I did not want to let my parents down.
Yes, you wanted to do the right thing.
I did. And for whatever reason, foolishly, because this is not the way my parents are, foolishly, I thought, I wonder if they're going to be disappointed. And so,
even though you grew up in a family of faith.
Yeah. Yes. And I don't know why. Maybe that's the way the enemy plays on your mind sometimes, right? He can plant doubts and fears. And so I can remember, I just knew like I needed to have this conversation as soon as possible. So when we got home, I think I got settled, and I think it was that same day. I was like, hey, Mom and Dad, we need to talk. And they just kind of sat down on the couch, and I sat down on the chair across from them.
I mean, that's got to be scary as a parent. We need to talk.
Yeah, I'm like a 16, 17-year-old kid. And like, excuse me, Mom and Dad, could you please sit down? We need to have a conversation.
I just got back from camp.
So I didn't tell them I'd gotten arrested or anything like that, which was good news. And I just said, I just feel that God's calling me to ministry. And I explained a bit of the story. And I didn't know what they would say.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. And my mom looked across the room and she said, yeah, we've known since you're about 10 years old. And my dad affirmed that as well. And I can remember them, like kneeling down on the couch next to me and praying for me. Right. So it was a time of affirmation, and more than just that, like confirmation. And I think that's what God will do. If God's calling you to ministry, yes, he's going to do a work in your heart, but it's also going to be confirmed through other faithful followers of Jesus. And I can remember thinking, my mom said, we've known since you were about 10 years old. I remember thinking, well, why didn't you tell me?
I know, right? You're like, you would have saved me a lot of turmoil.
You had all this figured out. Why didn't you let me know? But I appreciate the fact they wanted it to be God's calling on my life. They didn't want to be the parents that were like, hey, Jim, what do you think about being a pastor? Don't you think being about, I mean, because there's not a whole, there's a long line of farmers in our family and educators, but there's not a whole long line of pastors. I can't find a whole lot of pastors in that big red book that Aunt Gervis wrote, right? Mm-hmm. The genealogy of the Perdue family going back to 1822. I in some ways didn't know how to frame it, but they never pushed me in that direction. But the moment I sensed God's call, they were right there with me every single step of the way. And I can't tell you what it means. Number one, to have a family that understands that, because I know that there are some students, some kids maybe, that are struggling with this and their family wouldn't even know what that means.
There could be adults.
Yeah. Yeah, but their family wouldn't even know
absolutely.
What does that mean to be called to ministry. And
it's hard to explain what that means.
Yeah, because even to this day, people are like, oh, you chose to be a pastor. I'm like, that's not the way it works. And you don't want to over spiritualize it.
Yeah.
But it is really a calling. And so having that answer at the age of 16 or 17 kind of points you in a direction for the rest of your life. I still did go to the University of Georgia and have well-meaning people tell me I should be ashamed of myself for not going to Bible college. And I was just like, wow, a guy I met having lunch with my dad, a guy I met at Sonny's, in
Sonny's barbecue.
Yeah, Sonny's barbecue.
Which was one of our first dates.
It was, Sonny's was very central to our whole.
Yes, our whole story.
Life.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, we need to tell the Sonny story.
Keep going.
People they're going to tune in for the next time so we can hear the Sonny story. Yes. But I can just remember a guy saying, well, you're going to be a pastor? Yes, I'm going to be a pastor. Where are you going to school? I'm going to Georgia. Why would you go to Georgia? That's a god awful place to go. If you need to go to Bible college. And I just, as clearly as I knew God was kind of leading me into ministry, I really felt compelled that he called me to Georgia. And in that moment, I didn't know what to say to the guy other than, well, it looks like I'm going to the mission field early, because he was determined that if I was going to be a pastor, I had to have a Bible college degree. Fortunately, though, seminary will take you with a degree. So if you want to get a master's, I mean, they treat that master's of divinity like its own degree, completely and totally separate from whatever your undergrad degree was. And so I went to Georgia. I went to Southeastern Seminary. And God just began to, well.
That's when you met me.
Well, yeah.
At seminary.
Do we need to tell that story again?
No, we don't. We have it all
shining
recorded.
Behind your head. Yes. Yeah. I knew that night you were so far from the Lord, it took you 2 weeks.
Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Well, the audience needs to know.
I think it's a different episode. So we met and you were in seminary. You finished.
Yeah, I graduated seminary and this is another one of those things that's hard to explain, and I didn't know what God was doing.
Then we did a thing.
Yeah, we did. We left North Carolina and came to North Georgia, to a town that we had really never been to. And I mean, we had heard of it. It was a very fast-growing to Forsyth County, Cumming, Georgia, and you got a job at North Forsyth High School as a teacher.
I'm a teacher.
And
I was a teacher.
You were a teacher, and we started a church in Forsyth County in Cumming, Georgia. And I still to this day say, I mean, starting from the ground up, there's like 2 people there, me and you. No kids at the time, right?
No, just the 2 of us.
We didn't even have church growth the old-fashioned way.
That's a song, but I can't sing it. Go ahead.
Just the two of us?
Yeah.
Go ahead. We'd like to hear you sing it.
No.
So we for the first, 4.5 years.
Yeah.
We worked hard getting ready to start this church, and we launched this church. And I can remember reading success stories from all of these people. We started a church and we were running 500 in a week and 5,000 in 3 weeks. And, we've had 1 million saved. And after about a year, we were running 100 to 150 in a high school cafeteria in Forsyth County, Georgia, North Forsyth High School. And I can remember feeling like the biggest failure. And I don't know if I can't even remember if I verbalized that to you at the time, but we were just in the middle of a ministry and we were working hard to do everything. Church planting was the hardest ministry I'd ever had, the hardest thing I'd ever done in ministry. It's the first time I'm ever a senior pastor.
And there wasn't a lot of encouragement at that point for church planters.
No, now the North American Mission Board is all in to help support and encourage church planters. But then I felt a little bit like I was on an island. I felt a little bit like I was drowning because I was failing, even though looking back,
we were succeeding.
We were succeeding in the grand scheme of things. Like we were actually doing really good. We had a mega church a mile down the road on one side, and then another mega church put their campus a mile down the road on the other side. And I was just like, wow, did we pick the wrong place? What happened here? God, I thought you called us. I thought you made it clear. And but God taught us so much during those years of planting a church that we have used still to this day in ministry. Whether it's you see something needs to be done, you do it. We put up chairs and took down chairs. We put up a sound system, set up a stage every week, back and forth. Or
we had the trailer in our driveway.
We did. I pulled the.
You can back a trailer, baby.
I know how to back a trailer. That comes from some agricultural days, but church planting definitely enhanced that.
Roll that trailer right up that hill.
By the way, I did tell Stephanie, like if you have daughters and your daughters are thinking about getting married one day, you just need to make that boy back a trailer. All right. He is not marrying material if you can't put him in a truck and back up a trailer. Okay. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad I didn't have to pass that test.
No. I mean, the guy.
Know. Oh, I know.
But then you said you wanted our daughters to learn how to back up a trailer.
Yeah, I was like, that'd be good.
That'd be impressive, wouldn't it?
Be impressive. They can back that trailer.
They can feed goats.
Yes.
And back a trailer.
Yes. So we had two boys in North Georgia.
That's a country song.
We had two boys in North Georgia, and then we got the call.
Yeah, God.
A literal call.
Yeah, a phone call.
And a spiritual call.
This was, God was doing something in our hearts. I think he was finishing up our time, church planting. And I think in some ways through church planting, I was a little broken. And there was a church in West Tennessee, I think, that was a little broken. They had really gone through a hard time in the last 12 to 18 months. And so a pastor heard me speak at something and said, hey, I know the church and they could really use a pastor. And so just one day out of the blue, we got a call from a 901 area code. 901 is West Tennessee. That's the Memphis area. And just began to have a conversation with the pastor search team at Cross Point Baptist Church in Millington, Tennessee. And so it became clear that God was ending our time church planting, what I used to call boot camp for ministry. And I can remember talking to the pastor search team about this. And God was preparing to take us to a different area of ministry, which I didn't know at the time. And I don't think you really knew what we were getting into. I don't think I knew what I was getting into, because I love everybody on that pastor search team, but still I feel like God kept us blissfully ignorant as to what we were walking into at Cross Point.
Yes.
Because they were facing some severe financial hardships. They said at one time, I don't know, but they said at one time the church was running 1,500 and they were down to 500 or less. They were really, really hard up financially. Their reputation in the community had been tarnished. There was infighting. And
so we definitely didn't leave church planting to move up the ladder.
Yeah, no. And this is like following the plan and purpose of God for your life. And here's the interesting thing. I can see, looking back, I can see God's hand in the middle of all of it, right? Because we went from a church planting situation to what I would call a church revitalization situation. I didn't know what that was.
Right.
Back
we
then.
have a name for it now.
Yeah.
Everything has a label.
Everything does. I probably have a few. Church revitalization or rehabilitation. And so we walked into a church that was so hurting. I can remember one of the things I felt like Crosspoint needed that first year. They needed to hear, I love you.
Yeah.
And they needed to hear the word.
And that's all you did.
I was 29 when I went there. And I will say to this day, we had no idea what we were doing. I just tried to preach the word and love the people. And God did give us a supernatural love for Crosspoint. It was such a loving congregation, such a blessed ministry. We were only there four and a half years.
It was some good stuff, though.
We walked in and just started loving the folks and started preaching. And at 29 years old, just started watching God move. I think we were there 4.5 years. 3 of those years, we baptized right at 100. And I would have people say, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? And I'm like, I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm doing. And God almost doubled us in the time that we were there in terms of church attendance and growth. And the budget didn't double.
I was like, the whole time you're like, Lord, double the budget.
The budget did not double.
Bring in the money.
But I think he was teaching us complete and total dependence on him through that. Because it was always difficult financially. I got there in August, and by December we were having to cut salaries and lay off some folks, and it was very difficult. But I learned so much through that process. And one of the things that I learned was just sit back and watch God work.
And precious memories of just knowing God's faith. I'm good with songs. Y'all just didn't know it.
Hey, we're going to do a podcast called Stephanie's Jukebox on Second Thought. Stephanie's Jukebox.
But I don't know any of it.
Precious. You don't have precious memories?
I don't. I still love it when, like, we sing a hymn and I'm like, is this a new song? They're like, no, it's in the hymnal. I'm like, oh. I've only been doing this for about 20 years.
And I know every word of the first, second, and last.
Yes.
Maybe not the third verse, but I know first, second, and last.
I know. I'm looking at you and go, is this a new one? You're like, no, it's been around a while. Oh, okay. I'll just stand here and read the screens. That's what I'll do.
We have some precious memories from Crosspoint, and I said this while we were there. You and I talked about it. I said, I could stay here my whole ministry.
Oh, yeah.
We could stay at Crosspoint forever.
By that time, we had 2 boys and 2 girls.
Ooh. Yeah, because we had 2 boys in North Georgia.
Yes. I'm keeping up with the children.
2 girls, and we'll appreciate that. I'm glad you did. And otherwise, we'd have a couple in North Georgia and a couple in Tennessee and just 1 here. So I'm glad you kept up with them. But yeah, 2 and 2, 2 girls in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and God was growing our family. We were in a really great place.
We were
in ministry. And then that summer,
we got that call.
Summer of 2011,
mm-hmm.
I got a call.
From a 478 number.
From a 478 number. And that was from the search team at Second Baptist Church. And literally, I think you and I talked and said, I don't think there's a church in the world we'd leave Crosspoint for except Second Baptist Church, which is our home church. And Second had gone through a little bit of a difficult time. And really, in Second's history, there had never been a big bump in the road, a difficulty with a pastor. Like, it had been a very smooth ministry. Rasta Salter had been the pastor there for almost 50 years and faithful long-term staff members. And so they had been through a difficult time. And so looking back, I'm like, well, God taught me, going to Crosspoint, like, walking through a difficult time. He was preparing us. I didn't even know it at the time, right? Preparing us to come back. Because one of the first things we did at Second, what we noticed they needed was
love the people.
Yeah.
Preach the word.
Love the people. Preach the word. Our first 6 months here, we had people say, just thank you so much for preaching the word. And I don't know what else to preach, right? Like, what else am I going to say?
What do you mean say?
I'm not that interesting. I don't have that much to say.
Well, then we can just wrap this little podcast up, buddy.
You want me to start? I can start preaching on the podcast. How about that?
Yes, people would. So let me ask you a question. So obviously we're here. We've been here almost 12 years. Remember, I'm bad with math. So this is a question some people ask you. about being somewhere and then leaving another place. And they're like, how do I know? And you always tell them you feel like there's an anchor.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, look, the Holy Spirit leads us perfectly, but we do not interpret his leadership perfectly. And so I think there have been times where I looked at you and you looked at me and I said, I feel like this is what God wants us to do. And we're like, yay. And then we're like, we missed it. You know, I mean, sometimes that happens because even though God speaks perfectly, we don't really hear perfectly. Number one, I think, is if you're in the middle of a mess and you just want to get out, the enemy will send you a distraction or an option sometimes, right? Just to get out, right? So you don't just need to leave a ministry because you're not happy or you don't feel fulfilled or somebody said something mean to you, right? It better be like you better wrestle through, is God calling me? Here's the way I like to describe it. This is my farming background, but I've always said you can't plow a straight row while you're looking at another field. All right. Now, you're not a farmer. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, it does because I've heard you say it.
It just means you're not going to do a good job where you are if you're always looking for somewhere to go. Mm-hmm. But I do also believe there's a moment where God is going to give you a sense of release from where you are, even before he calls you where you're going. And the way I've described that is it's like a ship in harbor with the anchor down, tied to the dock, right? This ship is solid and secure. Then there comes a time when it's almost like you're untethered, like the ropes are untied and the anchor is lifted. You're still in the harbor, but you're kind of moving with the waves a little bit. I'm not quite as solid as I was. And then you'll sense a time where God says, now it's time to lift the sail. And you could lift the sail and you could still sit there in the harbor for some time until God kind of sends the wind, like the Holy Spirit says, this is what I'm calling you to do. So I think there has to be this lifting of the anchor, this a little bit of an unsettling or an untethering to what you've known or where you've been. And I've noticed that God begins to do that in my heart before it's not like, ooh, somebody called. I needed, and I
people
think,
always calling somebody.
Yeah. And pastors are harder to find than ever. And so, you have to make sure it's not just Bob on the other end of the line calling, but it's God calling. And he's going to, if you're walking with Jesus and you know the Lord and you're listening to the Holy Spirit, he will make his will clear. Sometimes we have a problem because we want our will to be his will. And we better pay close attention to what he's doing. And so God sent us here.
And a lot of people aren't willing to just stick it out through the hard times. They think there aren't supposed to be any hard times. This is where God called me. It's supposed to be easy. And that's not necessarily the case.
Right. And ministry can be the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. It's something that you have to wear. You got to carry 24/7. You're going to carry the burden. It's something that it's very real. It's very personal. Like getting up to preach and leading a church, all of that's very personal, right? As you're preaching, your personality's on display hopefully through the power of the Lord and his word. And so you can get tied up in a little bit of emotionalism if you're not careful, if things aren't going great. And then you can spiral if you're not careful. And so ministry is incredible, but you get some people who walk through difficulties and they're like, well, this was never supposed to be hard. That's not what I signed up for. I'm out. And then you really have to ask the question, did God call you or did you choose this? Because if God called you, last I checked, like God called you, he's not giving you a choice to sit this one out. You better keep up and keep with this and, do what God's called you to do. Be faithful in the good times and the bad.
Yeah, because he has a plan. I mean, even if you've messed up, he still has a plan. So you may have to live through your decision-making, your consequences.
Yeah, it was so neat to be able to come back home. And I don't tell a lot of people this, but like the night
now you're going to tell everybody. I've never told anybody this. I'm going to tell everybody.
Well, we do have more than 12 listeners from what I've heard. So, but
14.
it's because they want to hear you. I can remember the pastor that I talked to. He was actually associate pastor at our church at the time, who functioned as my student pastor because there were so many student pastors kind of coming and going during my ministry. And he told me something one night, and this was like really a dream of mine, not just to be a pastor, but early on when I was 17 or 18 years old, I felt like God put it in my heart to come back here. Now, you don't walk around for the next 15 years and be like, I'm going to pastor my home church, and this is a great church. But like, I can remember he's like, I would love to serve at Second. He said, I could see you serving at Second Baptist. Now, he never said you should come back and be the pastor, but some people say, I'd never go back to my home church, or I'd never go back to my hometown. I wanted to get as far away from that as possible. It's a dream come true for me.
It is.
To be back here. And it's a full circle moment that this is clearly what God created me to do and what he's called me to do. And it was almost like, 2012, January 1st, 2012, that was our first Sunday here. God just kind of, brought that desire, that teenage boy's heart to fruition. And it's not been perfect. It's not, I've made some mistakes, and church growth is a funny thing, and ups and downs. But man,
the whole world did shut down a few years ago.
Oh, that was nuts. Yeah. COVID was nuts. That's when I had my little viral speech, which is, you don't want to say viral during COVID, but got a lot of Facebook views. But I'm not normally like this, but it's like, you want to be a pastor? Jump in. The water's fine. Come have at it, because it was crazy. No, I'm so sweet.
You are. You're the sweet one. I'm sassy. Yes. So, well, thanks for sharing that. Well, and a lot of people ask me all the time, what's it like to be a pastor's wife? And when we first met here, it was more, I felt like I was being called to do some type of ministry, and I didn't know if I was supposed to go to seminary. And then we met, and I was like, good, I don't have to go to seminary. I'll just marry Jim, and life will be great. But and I remember that was one of the questions your parents asked me that night. You're marrying like the ministry, or marrying, I can't remember. How do you feel about marrying a pastor? Mm-hmm. That's maybe what they said. And I was like, I'm marrying a man. He just happens to be in the ministry. Mm. So that's kind of where we've been.
They weren't like, are you sure you want to marry Jim?
No, you were the precious.
I would have loved to have that, to have heard that conversation.
I wish I could remember it all.
I don't know. They bought you a milkshake at Burger King. I know that.
Yes, I know. Your dad called me. I had to pick up the phone off the wall and say hello. Uh-huh. Hey, Stephanie. Oh, this is Jim's dad.
They wanted to get to know you because I had already said, I'm marrying this girl.
Yes, and you were gone, so they had to figure out how to... Anyway, 20-something years later, I can fully see how that happened. I
do think it was so neat, though, because our salvation stories are so different. But one of the things I noticed about you is you got saved, and it was just like fast track to spiritual growth, right? You talked last time about how you're doing Bible study after Bible study and growing exponentially in your faith. But, and that, of course, is a personal thing, but I think God was preparing you, a year or so later after that to be married, right? So
to be married to you,
yes,
not just married.
Well,
and I'm not really your typical stereotypical pastor's wife either.
What would you mean by that, darling?
I don't sing or play piano,
or lead the women's ministry, But you do, and here's the thing: you do serve in the church.
I do. I serve in the church every time you're not preaching.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I actually asked you to do early on.
When we came back here, we made that decision
right,
together.
Because I love you being there when I preach. Even though sometimes I have to kind of pull out the words of encouragement. Hey,
I am full of them.
Yeah. I don't know. They spilled out somewhere else. I have to be like, hey, how was the sermon today? Good.
Stop.
You're married to me. You're required to at least say good. So I know you.
Okay, for all of our listeners, this is me. We've not talked about my love language. It's not words of encouragement.
We need to do a whole episode on love language. That would be a great.
We could.
That would be a great one. But
I am always of the philosophy: if I don't tell you it's bad, then it's good.
Then we got a great marriage. Let me circle back to that for a moment, because not your stereotypical pastor's wife. but you serve consistently, and you have served in ways in areas that are a little bit out of your comfort zone, whether that was preschool choir back in the day,
yes,
or right in your sweet spot, which is leading the senior high girls, their senior class, the 12th graders. And I did want people to know, listen to this podcast, if they see us park and then you get in the car to leave, you're not going to Starbucks to sit for an hour. You're going across the street to teach the girls, and then you come back. Okay?
I do.
Because people are like, where's Stephanie going? It's like, she's teaching a life group, y'all.
They see me pull out, and I'm like, I didn't just drop my family off. I'm actually here serving.
Where's First Lady going?
Yes. Well, I mean, because I enjoy serving the church alongside you. But I feel like being there with you is my job. Like, number one is being beside you.
Yeah.
And then everything else just falls into place.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Got you by my side. And that's more than anything, being in this together. Ministry, if you are married, you've got to be able to do ministry together.
Yes. Well, and I mean, that's a whole nother episode if we wanted to go into being a pastor's wife and the ups and downs of church ministry. And I can honestly say that we've served at some of the greatest churches, and I don't have those horror stories.
Yeah, we've really been blessed.
Yeah, we've been blessed by our churches, but I also commend you for protecting our family, protecting me, and we just don't put up with that.
God's been faithful.
It goes back to my face. I'm just kidding.
Okay. Let's do some rapid fire questions.
Oh, you're rapid firing me.
Can I ask some rapid fire questions?
Yes, because I got you for the next one.
Oh, great. Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes,
all right.
Yes.
Number one, texting or talking?
Oh, I don't know. Depends on what we're doing.
It's rapid fire, babe. You got to give me an answer.
Both.
Whoa. Text and talk at the same time?
No. I like talking to you all the time, but if you're not there, I'm going to text you.
Favorite day of the week?
Oh, I know yours. It's Sunday.
Okay. What's yours?
Oh, Friday.
Favorite city in the U.S. besides, of course, Kathleen, Georgia, where we live?
D.C.
Washington, D.C.
Would you say that? Would you say that I said that?
Yeah, you love the history there in D.C. Yeah. Nickname your parents used to call you?
I didn't have one.
Your granddaddy called you?
Oh, Lucian.
Stephanie Lucian.
That
was his middle name, right?
Yes. He used to call me Stephanie Lucian.
Oh, me. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
Oh, I'd speak every language in the world.
That would be cool. Favorite holiday?
Oh, Christmas.
Christmas. Mine's Thanksgiving. All right. Hey, we're going to end this episode of On Second Thought with the First Lady, Stephanie Perdue.
Your wife.
My wife. And I gave him your whole name again, so I'm sorry about that. You're here with my wife, Stephanie Lucian.
What? No.
Thanks for joining us today. God bless you guys. Hope you're learning and growing with us along the way. Thanks so much for listening to On Second Thought today. We are so grateful for your time. You can go to our website, secondfamily.church/thoughts, and let us know your comments, your thoughts, and any complaints go directly to Stephanie. All right. God bless you guys. Have a great day.